Okay, friends, here we are again for Adult Bible Study. We have been making our way through the book of Ecclesiastes, and by my counting, we are ready for the middle of chapter 3. We talked the last time about the well-known section of chapter 3, which the NIV has titled A Time for Everything. And we looked at all these pairs, and we said that there's really a couple different ways that we can understand it. And how we understand it has a little bit of an impact on what we do with it. So if these first 8 verses, a time for this and a time for that, time for here, time for there, all that stuff, if that's intended to be its own little deal, then it means one thing, and it's fine. It helps us to understand that things change. There's balance in life, and then that's okay. But if we look at it as being connected to the section afterward, which we have not talked about yet, then the focus isn't about balance, that there's yin and yang. It's more about God and how we respond to what God has put in place. Because as we look at that list, this is mostly just a little bit of review. As we look at that list, it is about balance. There's a time for weeping, a time for laughing, a time for searching, a time for giving up. That God has built into the universe these different seasons and cycles. God has planned into the universe these things. They don't just happen, but God has put them in place. And so what we have to figure out is how we're going to respond to it. So that's sort of where we're headed this evening, is to get a little deeper into that. Because while I believe it's nice for the world to understand that if things are bad, don't worry, relax. Things get better, because they always do. If things are really good, be careful, because things always get bad. They always do. Okay. It's nice for us to know that there's a little bit of balance. There's seasons and cycles, and things happen.
Too shall pass.
Yes. And that too shall come. So, it's good to know that, but I think probably it's more important for us to try to figure out how we respond to the sovereignty and the control that God has in all of that. Okay, so let's start at verse 9. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. We know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before. And God will call the past to account. Any immediate reactions to all that? Anything jump out at you?
God's in control.
Meaning says that God is in control. That's clear. Okay?
It kind of repeats some of the chapter 1 stuff, though, that what goes around comes around. It's,
Yep.
if it's already been, and it's gonna have,
There definitely are threads that run through Ecclesiastes, and so things that we see here, he's already touched on a little bit. I think here, like back, well, we'll just get right there. Back in chapter 1, verse 3, the question was, what do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? And so here, in the middle of chapter 3, he comes back around. Let's talk about work a little bit more. Let's talk about labor and toil. If it's not difficult to read the previous passage and to look at these words and to say, everything just is a cycle. It's like we just keep spinning our wheels. My mom is in town, and last night, at the end of a long day of doing the same thing that I did the day before and the day before, she said, "Do you ever feel like a hamster?"
Very descriptive.
No, but would you pass the cedar chips? So we can get that view from life. It's like same stuff, different day. But if we take a look at the passage again, as God is the focus, then we get to see that we're not just stuck in these never-ending cycles of the same stuff every day, but we understand that God is in control, that He is directing the seasons of our lives, and if we're really being honest, it's not the same as it was a year ago. It's not the same as it was 5 years ago, because things change. The weather changes, the climate changes, the politics change. Everything is always getting different. We could look at those words there in verses 9 through 15 and say, well, if God's in control, humans have no real power or control, so just get over yourself. You're not very important. God's in control. You're insignificant, and what you do doesn't matter. I don't think that's what the teacher here, Koheleth, is trying to get through to people. He's not trying to beat them into overwhelming sadness and despair, because you can take that and just say, well, if it doesn't matter, then I don't matter, and what's the point? I can just be done. That is not what we're trying to figure out here. We're not trying to slide into despair, depression, and suicide. We're trying to understand better that God is in control of things, and that we need to trust Him. In Winnie the Pooh, if I have to identify as a character, it's somewhere between Pooh and Eeyore. Like if they had a child together, that would be me. Always looking for a snack, but pretty low and introspective in things. We don't want to stay there. Okay. What did Doris Day sing a long time ago?
Que sera, sera. What will be, will be.
That's kind of the theme of some of these verses here.
I don't remember that.
Sure you do.
don't go there.
I wasn't alive when she sang Que sera, sera, but I do know whatever will be, because Ned Flanders sang it on The Simpsons in one episode. Anyway, life is more than just this rigid, unyielding determinism that says, well, this is the way it is, sorry. Okay? Not every detail of life is predestined. God puts general seasons in life, and opportunities come before us, and we should learn wisely to look at what's going on, to use some discernment, some judgment, and to figure out how we should act wisely, prudently, responsibly. Okay? Knowing that this is just a season, that this is an opportunity that God has laid before me, I want to figure out what this is really all about, and then I'm going to act responsibly. I'm not going to go off crazy and flying by the seat of my pants. We need to choose well, because choosing poorly can have serious consequences. As I wrote those words, I was thinking about the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they're all in a little cave, and he's trying to pick the Holy Grail, the cup of Jesus, and the bad guy, the Nazi sympathizer, chooses the cup. The old, 1,200-year-old knight has said, choose wisely. So he picks it up, drinks it, and he starts to melt right there. And the knight says, he chose poorly. I love that line. It's the understatement of the movie. Choosing poorly can have serious consequences in our lives.
So when he's talking about work here, but the repetitiveness, so like in the spring, the farmer plants a crop. That's his job. God's miracle is all you gotta do is keep it watered, and it turns into a plant.
Yes.
And then he harvests it, and that makes even, multiplies it, more food for everyone. Then a year later, he's doing the same thing all over.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is what value is the worker getting out of his labor other than the extra food? I mean, can you go a little deeper in the weeds on that?
The farmer plants, God rains, makes the plants grow from the seed. It happens over and over again. Every season we plant, we grow, we harvest, we plant, we grow, we harvest. So it's the benefit to the worker. Obviously, he is able to feed his family, or to sell off the excess to make money for his family to buy the things that he needs. If we believe that God is in control and that he places us in certain places to do specific things, then carrying out that task is a way of honoring God's will and purposes. You're being obedient to how he has crafted you and where he's placed you.
Right.
Because you could say the same for just almost any job.
But I was kind of referring back to when you said, well, if God's in charge of all of that, then why should we bother? I don't mean anything. But that's not true, because the worker still has a function to perform, even under God's control.
We all have purpose. The Rick Warren's thing for the last 25 years about the purpose-driven life is that we all have a shape that God has made us for. He gives us certain spiritual gifts. He gives us a certain heart, passion about specific things that are different. There are abilities, there are personalities, there are experiences that are all very unique to each one of us. God places us with those combination of things in a specific situation to be used for him and by him. So I think it is unfortunate that somebody could look at Ecclesiastes and get totally depressed and disappointed. Like it's the same old thing. Postal workers. We now talk about going postal. Why? It's a never-ending onslaught of mail. There's, it's the next day, and all the mail's got to go out, and the next day, all the mail's got to go out, and they get really, some of them have gotten really kind of out there based on that constant repetition. But I think school teachers feel the same way. Same dirty, snot-nosed kids are going to be in here.
Today they did.
Not doing all their stuff.
Today was one of those days.
Painters, well, it's a different color, but it's the same job. The guys who are fixing the roads, we've been fixing this road for 5 years. It's the same job. We haven't made any progress at all. Preachers.
Stop digging it up.
Preachers. I'm preaching the same sermon to the same people who are not going to listen again. But, I mean, so whatever it is that we do, there is a certain amount of that same thing going on. Hopefully, though, what we can get out of this is that God has placed opportunities before us. He has crafted us for specific things, and doing it honors Him and allows us to use how He's put us together.
The farmer can't be a preacher. The preacher can't be a welder. The welder can't build roads. Each one of those people, right, have a different place in the season or the world to do the things that they do, so that other people can do the things that they're doing, so that the other people can do the things that they're doing. And the farmer has to keep planting.
We're all connected?
The farmer has to keep planting because he's not a welder. I mean, because that's his lot in life.
We're all made, designed by God. Ephesians 2 says that we are His handiwork. We are like fine craftsmanship. It's not just that He threw a big lump and said, well, that one's James. But He's put that person together exactly the way that He wants, with the personality that He wants, with the abilities that He wants him to have, so He can do something specific later on.
Good, I like that.
Any other deep thoughts before we move on? We're still gonna touch on a lot of these.
So why does it say at the bottom, God does it so that people will fear Him?
Okay, well, we'll get there in a couple of paragraphs.
Okay.
But I'm gonna make a mark so I know to pay attention to that. All right. So we actually, all that was like pre-verse 9 kind of stuff. We talked a little bit about that question that comes again. We're looking at labor. It's interesting that and there in verse 10, the teacher says, I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. Somebody might say, well, he's just talking about the burden of work. Maybe, but I think it might also be that the burden is kind of goes back to the previous passage. The burden is that we want to understand how those cycles and seasons and opportunities work. I mean, don't we all want to know that? Why in the world is God doing this? Why in the world is God not doing this? I mean, we all have those kind of questions, right?
Mine says task, and somehow that sounds easier than burden.
Yeah, task you can check off. A burden is with you for a while. So, we've read through the passage, and we can see that that the teacher says that labor doesn't bring any significant gain. You don't really get that much farther ahead. You do the same work, but the work is never all the way done. Friday's laundry day. It's my day off, and so I do laundry every Friday. And you know what? I do laundry every Friday. You get it done and think, finally, everything is washed, dried, sorted, folded, and in people's baskets to put away. And you know what? Somebody takes their clothes off to put pajamas on, and it starts all over again. Okay, the work, yeah, just like dishes. You just get the dish, everything put away, cleaned up. Guess what? Time to start on dinner. Great. Paper plates.
They got the franchise a lot.
A lot of work, a lot of business is kind of just busyness. There's always something to do. We're never gonna really be done. When we retire, we think, oh yeah, I'm gonna have so much time to do all the things I want to do. How's that work? Is it working pretty well? Yeah.
Well, no, when you're retired, it's all your fault. I
do like verse 11 a lot, There's a couple of, actually both parts of the verse. Let me get my electronic Ecclesiastes pulled up here.
Everything beautiful in its time.
There is probably a 30 or 40-year-old song we used to sing in my former life, which is, it's called In His Time. And God makes all things beautiful in His time. And I don't know that I ever really knew until I got to Utah that's lifted right out of the text here. Where are we studying? What's the name of this book? Ecclesiastes 3:9. Okay. He has made everything beautiful in its time. And the next part, He has also set eternity in the human heart. And those are a couple of really cool little phrases, aren't they? He makes all things beautiful in His time. That seems like something that you'd want to have calligraphied onto a board or something, a plate in your house, or maybe a little cross stitch kind of a deal, some kind of embroidery thing. It's a pretty little piece of writing. And I think if we were going to see that online, you'd probably have this beautiful landscape behind it, mountains and sunrises or sunsets, or the ocean, or some beautiful valley or something like that. And it would be true that God has made the world a beautiful place, that creation is incredible. When we're driving to school this morning, there wasn't much haze. You could actually see the mountains, and you could see that they were red and orange and yellow. And Cora said, "Man, that's just really pretty. We really live in a pretty place." Like, yeah, we do. God does make things beautiful. And if you want to, stick a fork in it right there and say that you're done understanding that verse at that level, that's okay. I think he's going a little bit deeper than that. It is true that creation is very aesthetically pretty and pleasing.
This might be part of the discussion. Again, mine says appropriate rather than
There you go. So with all of the seasons and the opportunities that God lays out, he makes everything is right for what it's supposed to be. I worded it better than that. It has to do with the suitability of the world for all of the different occasions and activities and things that God has put in front of us. Everything. And so that we're looking at like everything from those first 8 verses. Everything is right and appropriate for the times and seasons. Okay? Boy, this is really rough. Yep. But this is the right way for this to be. God's in control. And we can rest knowing that He's going to bring us through this cycle, this season, this time. The other phrase at the end of the verse, that God setting eternity in the human heart, that one's a little more difficult to understand. That's way trickier. I think what he's aiming at, and when I say I think, it means me and all the Bible commentators that I looked at. It's that God puts in us a desire to understand how everything is working. We want to be able to look back and go, oh, that's what that was all about. Or we look ahead and say, boy, sure wish I knew what was coming. Sure wish I knew how this was going to work out, because I do not see a way out of this for anything good to happen. But as we go through it, it's like God works everything for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purposes, Romans 8:28.
Plus, if everything has already happened before, is it not that we can't look back in history and this is a terrible time, but back here was a terrible time and it was similar? And
you would like to think that there is some instruction there about how you can be wise. Hey, instead of living and learning, why don't we learn and live? Let's look back at somebody who went through the exact same thing. How did they navigate it? successfully or unsuccessfully, and adjust our path accordingly. You'd like to think that there's some understanding that if everything goes in cycles and seasons and there's nothing new under the sun, that we could look back and go, that's how it's going to happen. God fixed Cody, God can fix me.
But is it the exact same?
There's nothing that's exactly the same.
So how?
But we can still learn general kinds of principles. I mean, some of the same kinds of things are there. Even though our children don't want to listen to us because we're just too old and we just don't understand, we actually do understand because we may not have been in the exact precise situation, but we were in something pretty close. And there is wisdom from God that helps us deal with those things. God sets eternity. God is eternal. He has no beginning. He has no end. He was before time. He created time on the workbench in his garage. He understands it. He can get on this side of it, that side of it, on top of it, below it. He can go all the way around time and see everything at once. We would love to have that ability, maybe, in certain situations. We might like that in some ways. In other ways, that would be a terrible, terrible thing to be burdened with. That we always know exactly what's going to happen. We want to see how the pieces fit together. This thing happens with our kid, this thing happens with our spouse, this thing happens at work. How are all these things moving together at the same time? What is the end of this going to be? I think that what we can get out of the passage is that every moment is, and it is perfect when it comes. It's the right thing. It's the right time. Do we like it? No. Do we understand it? No. Are there evil things that can get in the way? Absolutely. But when God puts opportunities in front of us, whatever season we're in, we can make our way through. I suppose if we had to try to reword some of what the teacher's talking about here, that we might say something like, enjoy life while you can. Live each moment to the fullest. Eat, drink, and be merry, sure. One of my friends in Francisville used to say, wherever you are, be there. Find happiness within the limits of time and seasons and cycles. Wherever it is that we find ourselves, we need to trust that God is in control, that He can guide us through it. We just need to rely on Him. The teacher says, I know there's nothing better for men than to be happy and to do good. Okay? Again, God's in control. He gives us a gift. The gift is enjoying our lives and enjoying our work. It kind of seems like a little bit of a contradiction to what he said already, like work sucks until you die. But again, the focus is on God's control. We cannot change God's purposes. Everything that he does is cosmic and eternal, and everything that we do is limited and temporary. In the verse, he talks about eating and drinking, right? Is there anything that's more temporary than eating?
Well, I don't know.
You've had a meal that has satisfied you for the rest of your life? I can't even make it to 2 hours later.
I know that this is pretty permanent, seems like.
Maybe. Especially if you're eating Chinese food. You go eat Chinese at the buffet and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even breathe. And like in an hour and a half, boy, I could really use a Snickers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That
Eating and drinking, that just keeps on happening all the time. Life is really, really temporary. So we need to find a way to find some substance and satisfaction inside God's lasting purposes and our very temporary efforts. The Latin phrase from that movie a long time ago was "seize the day." Carpe diem. Grab a hold of everything you can for right now. Live in the moment. Don't be worried about what happened 20 years ago. Don't be focused on what's going to happen a year from now. You just need to stay right where you are. Okay. In verse 15, he focuses on, he hits the loop. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before, and God will call the past to account. Koheleth is such an interesting guy that he says this thing, and like he gets to a point, and then he just kind of doubles back on it and lays out the thing again. I suppose we're focusing on the fact that everything is repeated. There's nothing really new. The great idea we had, somebody else already had that. It's going to happen again. I was on a ministry Zoom call this afternoon for a seminar, and these guys who are megachurch pastors in huge congregations of thousands of people, they're doing the same kinds of things that people did 20 years ago in congregations of 40 and 50 and 80 people. They're baking cookies and giving them away to guests. They're standing out in the foyer and shaking people's hands and handing out their phone numbers when people go through. It's like, there is nothing new under the sun. Everything that was old is new again. My daughter came home with bell bottoms from the store 2 days ago.
I just saw some of those and I just went, wow.
Everything comes around.
We're back in fashion.
Again.
I thought, hey.
Bell bottoms out.
So I got one kid who's pegging the bottom of his acid washed pants, and one is wearing bell bottoms. They don't even know what generation they're in.
And the other one just doesn't care.
The cycle goes and goes and goes, and we just roll with it, knowing that God is in charge. He's sovereign. He's over all of the seasons and the cycles of life. And so now in verse 16, in the next passage, the teacher focuses on the problem of injustice. I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. So, the teacher gets a little personal here. I saw. This is his own assessment of things. This is what he has seen as, and if we believe that this is King Solomon, he's visited the courts, and what he sees is that justice is being miscarried a lot. There is wickedness in judgment. There is wickedness in justice. We see that like all the time. The wicked go free and the innocent are punished. Right? TV shows, movies, newscasts are all about that kind of thing. It seems like on a regular basis there's evidence that sets free a guy who's been serving time for a crime he didn't commit for 40 or 50 years. He kept saying, I didn't do it. And nobody believed. At some point, the teacher says, God's going to deal with this. God is going to bring real justice. In our world, we don't see it often, but in his economy and in his realm, there is absolute justice that comes from him. We've talked about these cycles and seasons. Justice is the same kind of a deal. There's guilty and there's innocent, and there is judgment coming. We just don't know when. And that brings us to verse 18. I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so does the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward, and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? What's the difference between humankind and animal kind, according to the teacher? Nothing. Just the same. We are like the animals in lots of ways. He says that both humans and animals face the same end. Everybody dies. Nobody gets out of here otherwise. Death is awaiting every animal, and death is awaiting every human. And in that, we're both very unlike God. He's eternal, no beginning, no end. He's permanent, we're temporary. There is a big difference between the creator and the created. There's the idea here about ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We come from dust, and to dust all return. It looks like every creature does the same thing, man or beast. You know, back in Genesis 2, it says the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Okay? We're made out of clay, full of the Spirit of God, the breath of God, but we're created from the place that we are created on. At the end, he asked a question about spirits. Do we know if human spirits go up and animal spirits go down? He doesn't really have a question because it's kind of rhetorical. Who knows? Everybody I know who has a cat or a dog that they desperately, deeply love, or a horse, want to believe that when we get to heaven, that Murphy and Shaggy and Flair are going to be right there to meet us. And we're going to spend eternity playing catch and fetch and going for rides up and down Heaven Boulevard. I had a professor in college who was absolutely convinced that because heaven is going to be earth restored, that whatever we see in the beginning in Eden is what we will see in heaven. In my mind, for most of my childhood, the idea of heaven is that it is this golden skyscraper city set against stark black space. And it's sort of shiny golden, but that was my view. If I believe what Brother Bob said, then it's not just the tree of life and the river of life, but it's a whole garden. And whatever we see that Adam and Eve experienced in Eden, trees and fruit of all kinds and nuts and wild animals that have to have names, and the lion will lay down with the lamb, some of those other ideas, that there will be lions and tigers and bears in heaven too. I don't know. Haven't been there.
Huh?
The only way you're going to have wings is if you're a parrot. Okay? Again, I don't know, and it probably doesn't really matter in the scope of things here for us. But, you know, that's the question that he lays out here. Who knows what happens at the end? Does the spirit of a man and a woman rise up into heaven? Does it stay right there in the ground? Does it go to the same place that the animal spirits do? I don't know. Because God did breathe life into the animals as well. Not in the same way that he did for us. We have a spirit and a soul. We just want to believe that they do. Maybe they do. I don't know.
I have something below the line. Interested?
Sure.
Though both man and beast will suffer a common fate and return to dust, man will face God in judgment.
That's how it ties into the last section.
Therefore,
We're talking about judgment and justice.
Therefore he should serve God faithfully in this life, enjoying what God gives him.
Odie is not going to be held eternally accountable for eating all of the banana bread and the zucchini bread and the leftover pork chops.
And then working it up on hopefully the lawn.
He's not going to be guilty for that disobedience because we said don't do that. But there is going to be judgment for all of us. What God has said we should do and should not do, he's going to say, all right, let's take a look at the record.
So on 22, so I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. But does that mean also their play? Their,
Life?
yeah, I saw there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work.
I think so, based on everything that we've seen so far in this chapter. You need to be satisfied, you need to be content with the place where you are. Where you are, that's where you are. So, with the power of God and faith in God, you will deal with whatever comes. Understanding that there are blessings that come, there are also struggles that come. But God is going to see you through those struggles because everything always changes. You know, if every human and every animal dies and there's no getting out of it, then, you know, death is inevitable. We can skip our taxes, but we can't skip death. Okay? For somebody who would say, well, if death is inevitable and not any better than a monkey, then why bother? Because God is in control. He has placed you in this place. He's given you who you are. He's made you who you are. And rather than worrying about the past and the future, what we've done or what's going to happen, what's going to happen to my business, what's going to happen to my home, what's going to happen to my bank account. We don't need to worry about that. We need to do the job that's before us and to enjoy what it is that we're doing. We need to appreciate the moment. Squeeze everything that's good out of it. We could start chapter 4, but I don't think we're gonna. Because that moves like right from work into slavery and oppression.
So go back to that one that I asked
Go
about.
back to
God,
that one verse, worth my star.
God does it so that people will fear him.
Fear him?
It
Mine
says,
says revere him.
God does it so that people will fear him.
Okay, let's get a running start
It
at
says
it.
in my Bible.
14, yeah, mine says fear also.
There is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him, or revere him, or respect him, or worship him. It would be my perspective, my understanding of all of the Bible and God's purposes is that he wants people to come to him. What does John 3:16 say,
For
Susan?
God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son,
That whoever believes in him
shall not
not
perish.
perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that through him the world would be saved. Okay? So that's the truth that Jesus lays out on Nicodemus. God has always desired that all of his children, as dumb and rebellious and reckless and ridiculous as they are, that they will eventually come back to him, that they will see him for who he is, that they will not just, when we see the word fear, we think about being afraid of spiders or clowns or psycho killers or whatever. We think about cowering in fear in the corner. I'm not listening, I'm not looking, just make it go away. We're not trembling in abject fear of God. What he's looking for is thoughtful, worshipful reverence. God, I see you on the throne. I understand that you created me, you have a plan for my life, you're in charge of everything, and so I will yield to you. You're the boss, I am not. Whatever you say, I'm going to do. You have ultimate cosmic power. I am in the middle of the night. I really don't stack up. Okay? Everything that we see that God is doing, if we understand it through what Jesus says there in John 3, is that everything happens so that people will come back to God. A few years ago, we did a sermon series called The Story. Were you all here for that? Okay, so in that sermon series, it was like 30 weeks long or something crazy like that. We used this other book that somebody put together called The Story, and in it, they've taken the entire Bible, sliced it off into 30 chunks, and what you get to see is that through every single bit and piece, you can see God's plan working from chapter to chapter to chapter. From creation through the time of Moses to David and Solomon, through the exile of God's people in captivity to the time of Jesus, the birth and the life of the church, all the way into Revelation. It's a really cool deal. We'll probably do that again somehow, like in this Bible study or something. But you get to see this big fat red scarlet thread that goes all the way through it. Okay, you get to see that purpose of God. I'm trying to pull people back to me, so they'll be with me forever. That's what it means. I think he does it so that they will fear him. He wants to bring them back into the right relationship with himself. Are you buying it?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
if you said it, I am.
Oh, wow.
I got that. That's when I started here. Was just at the end of the story.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, because I got into just the last little bit of that.
That was a good series.
Yeah,
We've got a lot of that stuff around. We could
that would be
do it
cool
again.
to do.
So that was
here.
8 years ago.
Wow. That's remarkable. That was probably just right after Brent. What
It was
you can't salt.
right after that.
Sorry.
You were leading the small group at
Jones.
with Stephen Rose
Oh, Stephen Rose has been hanging around for a long time. hasn't
Gary.
he?
and Gary.
And Gary.
Okay, friends. Well,
Gary.
let's mark it here at Ecclesiastes 4. I will tell you that it's been that will be 10:70. Wow. It's been nice to have people together for the potluck on Wednesday nights. If you haven't been coming, it's kind of nice just to get together. We have, I think last night there were a handful of kids and, like a dozen adults, most of which didn't stick around for anything because there wasn't a class, but they came and they had a good dinner and nice visits, so. It's chili night next week. Bring your cornbread and your corn chips and cheese.
Maybe I'll make some white change.
Okay.
I have a good recipe for that.
Thanks for being here. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off while we talk bad about you.